reviewed the text amendment and special use. The parking variance they did not touch upon because that's a zoning requirement, a zoning issue. So they only approved 2 out of 3. So I'll just surmise the commissioner's vote. So Commissioner Jason Berry made the motion, which was seconded by Arthur J. Ware, to approve the text amendment for Ophelia's Banquet, which is located at 13102 Southwestern Avenue. The commissioners amended the text amendment should only be allowed in the UTOD district and not in the C1, C2 districts. And the commissioners also suggested that the definition of a banquet hall should be revised to reflect Ophelia Smith Evans' proposed use for her business. The vote on the motion occurred in the following manner. It was a 5-0 vote. Lear, Holcaster, Berry, Protaska, and Bloom voted. The 2 that were absent were Brown and Ebeling, and that was for the text amendment. The second vote was for the special use. So Commissioner Jason Berry made the motion, which was seconded by Ronald Bloom, to approve the special use for Ophelia's Banquet, which is located at 13102 Southwestern Avenues. The commissioners amended the special use should only be allowed in the UTOD district, not in the C1 and C2 districts. The vote on the motion occurred in the following manner. Three people voted for the special use, and they were Polcaster, Berry, and Bloom. 2 people voted against it, which was Weir and Pataska. And then we had 2 people that were absent, Brown and Ebeling. And that was the vote for the Planning Commission on the text amendment and special use. So in the interim between planning and zoning, I revised the application to reflect the request of the Planning Commissioner that, the request for a text amendment will allow a banquet hall facility similar to what Ophelia Smith Evans is proposing, only in the UTOD district, the Uptown Transit Oriented Development District, and there will be no banquet halls allowed, either as a permitted or special use, not allowed at all in the C1, C2. And the commissioners also suggested that we fine-tune the definition, which did occur. The communications between me, the planning chair, the zoning chairperson, Kimberly Byrne, Linda Goldberg, Ophelia Smith Evan, and we also even had our attorney participate, Burke. Attorney Burke participated. So the definition that I forwarded to everybody on last Friday's email is the one where it's much longer. It's the revised definition that talks about the bar and the seating and what have you. So these were the 2 items that were reviewed and approved for the zoning board to take up eventually that same night. But since we did not have a quorum on Wednesday, August 26th, the next available meeting was for October 1st, which we did not have a quorum, and today we do, November 5th. So please take into account that this was heard on August 26th. Some time has passed, which I believe is good because there were lots of communications going back and forth, and there were some revising of the language of the definition and reflecting at the parking lot, Lot A. So that's what I have as a summary of the findings of the Planning Commission.
Thank you very much. Howard, just for clarification, the purpose that we are having a text amendment review is because this particular definition, banquet hall, does not currently appear in our Blue Island zoning code. Is that correct?
Right. So just to expand upon it, We do not have a zoning definition for a banquet hall. Neither do we have anywhere under the table of allowed allowed uses, which is labeled as permitted uses or special uses for such a use. So the text amendment is for the text, the allowance for such a use, and the UTOD to have a proper definition for this applicant or for any other applicant that want to apply for a banquet hall. And that's that.
Okay. Just for clarification and into the record, I want to make sure to read this definition that we will be reviewing and discussing. So a banquet hall, in quotes, is a building or portion thereof, and it's my understanding that this has been reviewed by Attorney Goldberg and by Ms. Smith-Evans for review, and I believe that this is a concurrent agreement. Is that correct, Ms. Goldberg?
If you want to read, I can confirm that this is.
I'll read it, and then you can respond. Thank you. So banquet hall, in quotes, is a building or portion thereof, the principal use of which is for events which are hosted for one-time, special, or occasional events. Typical examples of such one-time, special, or occasional events include banquets, luncheons, receptions, weddings, birthdays, retirement anniversaries, and similar celebrations and commemorations, fashion and other artistic demonstrations, educational seminars, classes, and conferences. Such a use may or may not include kitchen facilities for the preparation or catering of food, and 2, the provision of alcoholic beverages for on-premise consumption, but only for patrons attending any such scheduled events, and provided any licenses required by the city of Blue Island, should be, have been obtained in advance, period. This is a definition that has been, I believe, reviewed by Ms. Goldberg, Attorney Goldberg, and your client, as well as by Howard Kaparias as representative of the city. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Ms. Goldberg?
Yes, that
Okay.
is correct.
And Howard, this has been reviewed by you as well, correct?
Yeah, it's been reviewed by me with our municipal attorney. She's fine with the definition. Kelly Burke. I forgot her first name. Kelly Burke.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions or comments about its definition or use?
Can I interject for a moment?
Sure.
Can we take a vote for accepting the text amendment from the Planning Commission and then a second vote for the special use, and then we could start the conversation with the zoning board?
You want to have a vote before we have a conversation about it?
Yes, this vote is just accepting the Planning Commission findings and conditions. So we have it in the record that you have accepted the Planning Commission's recommendation.
Joseph Martin would recommend we accept the Planning Commission's recommendation.
Okay, so that's Joseph. Who's going to second it?
I, Jeff Atwell, will second the motion.
And the same for that's for the text amendment. And for the special use?
I so move to accept the recommendation of the Plan Commission
Right, for the special use?
for the special use.
Right, and who's going to second that?
This is
Joseph
Ron.
Martin, I'll second.
Okay, I'll defer to Joe.
Okay.
So Joseph or?
Joseph.
Okay, Joseph. Can we have a vote for the first one, the text amendment?
Roll call, or all those in favor? Madam
Roll
Chair,
call.
Mrs. Byrne,
Aye.
Jeff Atwell, aye. Joseph Martin,
Aye.
and Ronald Bloom.
Aye.
Motion carries 4-0, Madam Chairwoman.
Can we do a roll call
Okay.
for the second one, the special use?
Yes. ahead.
Chairman Byrne,
Oh, aye.
Jeff Atwell, aye. Joseph Martin,
Aye.
Ronald Bloom.
Aye.
Motion passes, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. Howard, are you suggesting that now we have a discussion about it?
Yes, so I didn't interject before because the definition was one of the conditions that the planning commissioners wanted a fine tuning. So you were just going over the definition with their attorney, Linda Goldberg. So the zoning board is aware of the revised definition. So now we can start the text amendment, special use and parking variance for the zoning board of appeals review.
Okay, so banquet halls. I have received a number of comments about banquet halls in Blue Island that people, I think, misunderstand what a banquet hall is, especially as a more formal kind of business, not as a kind of something that happens occasionally. So that's a comment that I've received and had to clarify as I understand the business. But Attorney Goldberg, if you could do me a favor, please, if you could kind of review sort of the business model that reflects the type of business that the banquet hall, Ophelia Banquets, would reflect.
Yeah,
And kind of the timings, the daytime, or the timings that I guess anticipated for this business as it reflects to some of the comments about parking and that sort of thing, please. If you could kind of limit it to maybe about 10 minutes, I would appreciate it.
that's fine. May I ask, Madam Chairman, that in the event that in my discussion there are questions that you have for the applicant, that we swear in Ophelia Smith-Evans, who is the president of Ophelia Banquets Entertainment Conference Center in the Illinois Corporation, and Alex Laufman, who is the president of Blue Island Inc. In Illinois Corporation, who is the owner of the building.
Hardly hear you,
If you
Linda.
could swear them to the testimony.
Can you maybe turn up your sound a little bit, or maybe move a little closer?
Can you hear me now?
It's rather muted.
Is this any better?
It's slowly getting better.
If I can bump up the volume here, I apologize.
Thank you, Ms. Evans, for commenting on it. I was having a little trouble hearing her as well.
I knew I was getting older, but I said, let me just.
We don't want to admit that.
Put that here.
Is that better? Hello?
It's still about the same for me.
Okay, let me try turning the sound this way. Is that better?
Is there anything in front of your speaker? Is there anything on your speaker, or?
Listen, so let me take it out of
I'm so sorry.
Is that better?
That's a tiny bit better. Wherever your microphone is that's taking in your voice, there's something around it that is muffling it a bit.
All right, is this better?
I know that our
Little
clerk
bit.
was having some problems with that before as well.
I'm going to try this. Is that better?
It may be easier just to call in from another device.
What was your
Attorney
question?
Goldberg, is there any problem if you might be able to call in?
I guess so. I have the volume up, so it's screaming in my ears. Not quite sure what's happening. Yeah, let me.
That's okay. Is it possible you could call in? I'm sorry to ask you to do that. We greatly appreciate it. It would be a lot clearer.
What number would I call into?
626-6799.
Is this say 312-626-6799?
That is correct.
Yeah,
Second. Hopefully I don't get
I find that
reverberation
I
with
have to
both
use my
sounds.
phone as
Make sure
well.
that's
It's just clearer. And then you'll need to turn your computer sound down or mute it.
I was telling me I have to put the meeting ID in. Hold on a second. Oh my God. Oh, now my call cannot be completed without, all right, let me try this again. A number. Please re-enter your meeting ID followed by pound. Okay, what's my meeting ID number? You know my meeting ID number offhand?
841
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
841
Mm-hmm.
5337 3174. Likely going to ask you for a password as well.
Howard, while we're waiting, could you please check your text messages, please?
I did.
Oh my God, what's the password again?
755216.
No, I didn't. Oh.
Really, what was your question again?
755216.
Correct.
Oh my God. Oh, she disconnected me. You know what? Let me get my husband. Hold on a second. See if he can work on the sound.
Really, what was your question again?
The question was, I just wanted her to briefly, within about a 10-minute summary, please, to kind of go over the business model, the thoughts, parking kind of needs, and that sort of thing. Actually, if you're okay, I understand that Ms. Goldberg was to represent you in this meeting. So she had suggested that you be sworn in. I'm not familiar with that procedure, so I apologize.
Everything's new.
Newbie. Sorry.
Okay, can I have the volume up on this? What, maybe I should, maybe what if I put my headphones in?
That might help.
Okay.
Otherwise, you go into settings. Put the microphone on.
Technology. I work in the technology field, and unfortunately, our computers are like our televisions. They have good visual, but the sound systems are poorly supported. Some of them work okay, but a lot of them require extended capability, and so
They're definitely temperamental.
they are.
Definitely temperamental. You just don't know. Yeah.
True. Especially, computers that laptops that you move around so much, things get jogged and disconnected, and unfortunately get junked up with paraphernalia around it all the time. So.
All right. I'm gonna see if this helped.
Much better.
Oh, there you
is this
are.
better?
There you are. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Wow.
Okay, great. Thank you, Alan.
Thank you for your. I appreciate you the effort. Okay. Ground control.
Oh my gosh. All right, let me. I don't.
We can just adjust the camera. I think we'll be ready to go. There we go.
There you are.
Thank you very much.
Oh my gosh, yes, thank you. I have to laugh because I have 3 kids. One's a filmmaker, one is a musician, one is an actress and musician, and they're all just technically very competent. And I'm actually, make a long story short, as well as being a lawyer, I'm a part-time personal trainer. A decision I made late in life to just help people in my age group. And so I've been trying to do Zoom meetings with a couple of clients, and I've had my kids just say that I am like technologically the worst person to be doing this. But I'm an excellent lawyer and an excellent trainer.
Well, you made it. You did it. You accomplished the goal. Thank you so much.
All right. So in response to your text amendment question, I have to say that this was a fun exercise because as well as being a lawyer in private practice for many, many years, I was also in Corporation Counsel for the City of Chicago doing legislative matters and coming up with definitions. And so this was a fun exercise because several cities do not have a definition of banquet hall in particular, including the City of Chicago. And as you said, Madam Chairman, the common usage of a banquet hall has morphed into also being a convention center just because of the nature of changing business. So both Howard and I looked at several definitions of several cities, as well as thinking about what Ophelia's plan is. And that was the intent to come up with a definition. Having said that, I was also appreciative of your city corporation council coming up with a definition. And I understand that, this is a new exercise. Often when there are new definitions, they are tweaked as the actual application is seen by companies. But I think this is a pretty good definition that is comprehensive enough to cover the potential uses that would be used not only by Ophelia's banquets, but that seems to be in keeping with the trend of other cities of what a modern banquet hall looks like. What I started to say before I spoke was if it is your practice to swear in witnesses, to perhaps at this time swear in both Ophelia Smith Evans, who is the president of Ophelia Banquets, Entertainment and Conference Center, Inc., an Illinois corporation, who is the president and proprietor, as well as the applicant of the proposed banquet hall. And then also co-applicant, because he is the owner and landlord of the subject property for which there will be lease of this facility, is Alex Loftman, who is president of Blue Holdings, Inc., an Illinois corporation.
Okay, this is, as I mentioned earlier, this is somewhat new to me, so I apologize. For the purpose, why are we swearing them in?
Because this is a hearing and it's like a court proceeding. You have to ask them for their full legal name, their place of address, and do they swear to tell the truth, only the truth, and nothing but the truth? So be God, and then they're sworn in.
Typically not God for hearing, but yes, the rest is typical.
Okay.
Separation of church and state. Most are taking it out.
As you can see, we don't do this very often, and so I don't. Howard, are we prepared to do that?
Yes, just ask. Okay. Let's start with the attorney first. Ask her for legal name, first and last name.
Yeah, my experience is that as an advocate, the attorney isn't usually sworn in, but again, for the record, I'm Linda Vernon Goldberg, attorney with Budell and Damascus, attorney for the applicants, Ophelia Banquets, Entertainment and Conference Centers, and Blue Island Holding. My address is the law firm of Budell and Damascus, 1 North Franklin, Suite 1200, Chicago, Illinois. And I agreed to fully and faithfully provide not testimony, but counseling and information as consistent with the application as submitted.
Thank you very much.
And now you have to do it with me. Yeah.
Hi, Ophelia Smith Evans. I don't even know what to say. I'm Ophelia Smith Evans. I'm the principal owner of Ophelia's Banquets, Entertainment and Conference Center. The address, you want my physical home address or the address? The address of the building, the address of the parcel is 131.
Right.
13102 Southwestern Avenue in Blue Island, Illinois, 60406. And I swear in to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. No, I'm just kidding. I don't know what else to say.
That's fine. That's good.
I'm silly, sorry.
Thank you very much. Mr. Leifman?
Hi, I'm Alex Leifman. My home address is 1105 Hohlfelder, Glencoe, Illinois. I'm the owner of the building located at 13102 South Western Avenue. I swear to tell the truth, nothing but the truth.
Thank you very much. Okay, Attorney Goldberg?
Okay, so the text amendment application, there are no changes to what was submitted. And my understanding is recommended for approval by the staff and also approved by the planning committee with the qualification that the banquet hall definition be amended as was just read into the record, and also with the recommendation that the zoning changes for text amendment requested are for the UTOD district only and not in the C1 and C2 districts as initially included in the application. And the reason for that, and I'm fine with that, is that the Plan Commission wanted to make sure that for this initial application of any banquet hall in the district, that the space available for such entity was not overbroad, that because we are asking for approval in the specific UTOD district to not open the floodgates of wondering whether it's appropriate for other districts. I had included a broader definition in Howard's request in his desire for overall comprehensive city planning, but I must say I don't object to the development committee's suggestion that as the first application, it might be prudent to limit it to this district, and then in time see what happens, because you certainly would have the right, if another applicant in a C1 or C2 district requested expansion of the districts, to at that time consider expanding the definition. I'm sorry, expanding the areas. So with that, I have no changes or further comments to the text amendment application and request that it be approved.
Thank you very much. I agree with you. I think the definition shouldn't be too broad because we don't have any established need to submit something broader. So keep it reasonable and concise as it applies to the current needs. As things change, then they can be examined and reviewed and added or expanded as necessary. I appreciate that. Can we maybe talk a little bit about maybe the hours of the business? As we were talking about parking, and parking will come up, maybe we can review how the business will work during the day, during the evening. Does it have any kind of pre-conceptual hours that it may be open?
Yes.
Or proposes to be open?
My understanding is that you would separately consider text amendment special use application. If you prefer to move now to a discussion of the special use application and approve all of these at the end, that's fine. But if you could clarify if we are now moving to special use application issues.
Howard, what do you think is appropriate? Should we do this one by one, or should we do both of them and then?
I take it it would be prudent to do all three, but one by one. So the text amendment should be reviewed, questioned, answered, take a vote, and then move on to the special use. The special use can segue into the parking variance, and then that discussion will go back and forth. And when the board members feel they're fine with the question and answer, then you could do two separate votes, one for the special use and then one for the parking variance.
So if I may add this, the purpose of a text amendment is essentially not even thinking about the applicant at this point, but just saying, as a city, is the concept of a banquet hall, assuming we have an acceptable applicant, an acceptable plan, including usage, hours, parking, is something that we want. It's the same thing as saying, do we conceptually want to have a restaurant in here or a bowling alley? So that's essentially what you're voting on.
Okay, I agree. Thank you very much for the clarification. Mm-hmm. Is there any comments or thoughts from the committee as it relates to this definition and its defined uses?
I have no.
Presented. Ron, you're muted.
Just a comment that I think it's very much in line with the discussion that took place at the planning committee and some of the ideas and concerns that were raised there. So I believe it's all in alignment with that.
Thank you. Anybody else?
No, ma'am.
Do we have a motion to accept as is?
I, Jeff, I will also move to accept the definition of a banquet hall as presented.
And the location and the district of UTOD.
And the location of said banquet hall and the UTOD.
Do we have a second?
You're on mute, Ron.
Okay.
This is.
All right. I, Joseph Martin, I'll second.
Thank you. This text amendment has been approved. Excuse me.
Please conduct a roll call.
Okay.
Chairperson Byrne,
Aye.
Jeff Atwell, aye. Joseph Martin,
Aye.
Ron Bloom,
Aye.
motion carries. Chairperson,
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Okay. Does this conclude our text amendment then, Howard?
Yes. So basically what everybody voted here was for the definition to be eventually placed in the zoning section of the definition, and also to be placed under the UTOD use table as a special use.
Thank you for explaining that.
You're welcome.
So now on for the review for the special use.
Yes. This is a request for a special use application. And again, the purpose of a special use application in this particular case is because there has never been a banquet hall before. It is typical for a city to only approve each applicant on a case-by-case basis, similar to the way that you would include review a bowling hall or some other thing that is new as well as use intensive. Because this is a new business, there are some things that will depend and evolve depending on the building, the business as it develops. Just as a bowling alley or restaurant couldn't necessarily decide entirely hours until they see the uses, that is something that Ophelia is going to determine more specifically as she receives applications for particular events. For example, as you see, some of the uses are wedding. Well, typically you're not going to see anybody getting married at 7 o'clock in the morning. It's also asking for a convention. Possibly someone would want to start a meeting at 7 in the morning. There will be weddings that will be sometimes in the evening. So this is, it's a little bit hard for me to not speak a little bit about the parking as well as special use application, special use, for the reason that I said that this is a new business with applicants that will be coming to Ophelia. I think the reason, and to the city's credit, that a parking study was suggested, commissioned, and that part of this application takes that in consideration for the evolving uses. It's also the reason that a building permit is required to at all times comply with all of the building requirements of the city. That will include noise, garbage pickup, and alterations of parking usage at each event depending on the nature of the facility, nature of the event. So in this case, we have the former Klein's department store, and Ophelia has leased the first floor for the operation, and will use a small portion of the second floor for purposes of consultation with users of the facility. An example would be for a wedding. Someone's booked a wedding, but they also want to be able to view, what potential catering services are there, and what potential other accoutrements could be available. Ophelia would use in her office, tailor that to the event to determine what makes sense for this facility. At that time, she would also talk about the number of guests. She would go through what the hall capacity is. And there would be a contract between Ophelia and that entity to say, this is what you must do. You can or cannot serve liquor depending on whether the catering is there and that type of thing. So unlike a restaurant or a banquet hall. It's something that's going to be crafted each time. And so, again, the beauty of having to comply with building permits and to continue to comply with all city ordinances, this is something that you have a continual check and balance as it develops. Businesses can be sanctioned or shut down, as well as rewarded, depending on their usage. I've been very impressed, and I say this not just as the attorney for the applicant, but just speaking both with Ophelia and Alex. I think it's rare that you see a landlord and a tenant work this closely and collaboratively to figure out what makes sense. Alex is not only the owner of the building, but there are other uses in the building, and so he's been very cognizant of how this has to work with the other uses in the building, and as an owner is very interested in making sure that it works within the context of the neighborhood. Likewise, I know that even before I got involved in this, Ophelia was very active in speaking with other people at the city, getting a good sense of other businesses. The comments that we received tonight about parking and other things, I think she's been way ahead of it in terms of understanding as a business, and particularly a new business, her need to work with these businesses in some ways more than the other businesses, because these other businesses and clientele will be often her clients. The request again is for a banquet hall, a new banquet hall, consistent with the definition, again, to be used on the first floor, which would be the only place that patrons would be allowed to come. Any usage on the second floor would be prior to an event for consultation purposes. Guests would have to sign a contract. Ophelia would have available staff or consultants with respect to making sure that, the building is there, the building is open. Again, both she, as the leaseholder, has a responsibility to Alex to make sure that people aren't trashing the building or doing anything silly, as well as Alex would. So, it is unlike a situation where you have somebody sublease a space. This is not going to happen. Ophelia at all times will maintain control of that leased space, and these are guests for that one event, such as if I had a party in my house, I'm still responsible. So that is a check and balance that you would have, as well as, of course, having to comply with all building codes. In the application, and as confirmed with the staff report, I think we adequately explained the justification and complied with the findings of fact that need to be addressed for special use. Just really quickly, because I know we're out of time, I think the application and the staff report supports that this is something that will be appropriate for the general welfare of the community. It will not diminish the property values, and in fact, it'll likely enhance the property values of the building by bringing a vacant building back into productive use. It will not impede the orderly development of the surrounding community because it is an existing building, and so there are no changes there. There are no effect on the access roads, again, because it's an existing building and because of the parking compliance that will be discussed in the next application. Similarly, with the congestion of the streets will be addressed in the next application. And then finally, that the special uses in all respects will otherwise comply with the ordinances and requirements of the city. And as I said, even after zoning approval, Ophelia will have to get approval for the from the building department for all uses, including the proposed sign of the building. That's all I have. unless you have specific questions about the use, I would suggest that would be probably most appropriately addressed to Ms. Smith. Ms. Smith Evans, I'm sorry.
Thank you very much, Attorney Goldberg. Does anybody have any questions?
I'm not sure if now is necessarily the time, but since we're asking, Jeff Atwell here asking, what's the maximum occupancy of the space designated for Ophelia's Banquets at the address?
There are two pretty good sized banquet halls, and I think the total for the banquet halls altogether are like 330. And so that's if all three, actually it's three, but one is going to be narrowed down. But if we use all three, then that's when we'd be needing the capacity of more parking spaces. But I don't want to say that, but the likelihood of all three being used is at the same time is probably rare. The one is being used also specifically for a training center and also for like say for instance conferences, boardroom meetings and things like that. So that's the smallest one that will be the primary use for that one. However, it could be converted, just depending on the seatings for children's parties or anything like that. So.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else?
If I may interject again, with regard to the day out, the times, I know that you mentioned that specifically. The last event, they get 6-hour increments. They do get an hour, a half an hour to do whatever the hour to half an hour to set up. But the end of the last event is about 11 p.m. And then we allot the hour for them to clean up. So everybody should be out of the building by 12. Okay, so this is not a lounge where they're there to 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning.
This is Howard. So on page 6 of my staff report, I go into details about the plans that were submitted in conjunction with the application. So there's going to be 3 halls. The first one is called Diversity Hall, Grand Hall, and then the third one is called Vermont Hall.
Those names would change though.
Right. Per the plans that were submitted, they were showing 349 seats for all 3 of the halls on the first floor. And then the plan, the furniture plan, speaks about an occupant load of 410 people. This is per the architect from the plan.
It won't be that many now because of the change in it, but go ahead.
Right. What I like to say is just keep in mind, the occupant load that's done by an architect is usually people standing next to each other, arm's length from each other. In this event, a person is renting a hall for, let's say, I don't know, 4 tables, 5 seats per table. They'll basically be the people that are participating that will be seating and eating and drinking, plus whoever's participating, musical, the people that are having a ceremony, and probably the people that are working. So I do concur. I don't think it's going to be 410 people always at once, but that's what the architect had to come up with, some type of an occupant load just to demonstrate worst case scenario.
How does that align with your parking estimates?
Well, for zoning, I look at the number of seats to calculate the parking. So 349 seats were counted, were shown on the plan. And that's where I came up with my 87 parking spaces that should be required for a banquet hall. Then we, as everyone's aware, we had a parking survey done, a parking plan done where the numbers changed a little bit because they were using different analysis. So the parking went from like 91 to 98, which was calculated by the planning, by the traffic study. keep in mind, it went from 87 to 91 in my calculation because I was also looking at the square footage on the second floor plus the plus that. But the Kelly Connolly, Sam Schwartz parking study came up with a 98 number. And keep in mind, from day one, I always mention that if there's going to be a parking variance presented to the Zoning Board of Appeals, it should be for the entire building, first floor, second floor, worst case scenario. So the Zoning Board will have an opportunity to look at everything cohesively, all as one. So keep in mind, it's not 98, there is a prospective antique store that's coming in, and there are 3 apartments on the second floor, plus Ophelia's Banquet.
4 apartments.
Okay, 4 apartments. So
Okay, let's hold the additional parking discussion until we get to the parking variance. Thank you. I actually have a couple questions. So Howard, you brought it up that this is really a mixed-use space that Mr. Leufman owns, of which part of it will be leased by Ophelia Banquets. Number one, how are these spaces separated, as one is anticipated to have a liquor license, and I understand that there's a separate retail area that is anticipated as well. Can you kind of help to describe how these areas are separated?
Alex, you want to take
different
that?
Egresses?
I can explain.
Different egresses or different separation to ensure that liquor kind of stays in Ophelia's business and retail kind of stays in its own kind of area.
Yes, I can explain that. If you look at the history, the most recent history of the building, there was an antique mall in the corner of the building on Western Vermont, while the other space, which at that time became vacant, was a hardware store. So essentially, everything is well separated, having both front and rear entrances for both the corner store, which was the antique store, as well as the hardware store. So I think both spaces are going to be designed in such a way that there will be no interactions between them.
Are there any doors that you can go between the 2 sides of the businesses?
No.
Okay.
You'll have to come out and re-enter. So, I mean, you'll have to go outside.
Okay, thank you. I have a second question, which is on the first floor, it's my understanding from the design that the banquets will be held, the weddings, I guess other events, entertainment, would be held on the main floor, which is the first floor, and usually with these type of events there is alcohol. Then you also have a second floor, which is what you're anticipating is more of a conference type of level. How are you utilizing your liquor license between the 2 spaces?
Well, the second floor will not be per se conference. What it is, the second floor would be everything banquets. So it'd be wedding gowns, it'll be tuxedos, it would be counseling in that sense, what the attorney was saying, counseling in that sense, where they fill the application, complete their application on the first floor, or from my office, wherever it would be, and then they go up to the second floor and they can look at the wedding gowns to choose, they can look at the tuxedos to choose, they can look at the flower arrangements, anything decorative, they can look at everything to a banquet on the second floor. So that has nothing to do with all the patrons that come in for the second floor. They will be the patrons who actually coming in to book the facility. And so with regard to the alcohol is not for consumption from the external. It's only for banquets. It's only for the reception. It's only for any parties that are there. So say, for instance, there's 2 rooms here. You have an adjoining kitchen. Come in, the caterers can come in and do whatever they need to do in the catering kitchens, and then with the kitchen is the actual bar area. You can tell I don't drink, so I'm trying to figure out what that name is, but the actual bar area is on the outside of the kitchen. And so
Right.
It's being used only for the patrons who are there soliciting the banquet hall.
And
Okay,
typically,
when you say this,
I'm sorry.
when you say the second floor, is the second floor? I understand there's a basement area level. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And then so is the second level the banquet floor?
No, the banquet floor is the first floor. And then there's an elevator to the second floor, or there's stairs to the second floor. And there's
But isn't there a basement level?
Well, there's a banquet, but the basement won't be used. It would probably be used for storage or something like that, but the banquet area will not be used at this point. Alex, you want to interject? I see you sitting.
Well, what it is, the idea was that the basement is going to use strictly for storage, so tables, chairs, things like that. So we can actually move things around to accommodate events. The second floor was, the idea there was going to be more like a showroom where people can see flower arrangements, see pictures and things like that. So it'll be like a consultation area, showroom, possibly some office space, maybe some dressing rooms and things like that to prepare for certain events. So people can go up, and then come down if you have a bride that's going to get ready and then come down during ceremony and things like that. So it's going to be planned to be flexible space. We don't anticipate any full-time employees working upstairs during events. So essentially, as Howard was saying, we will have the retail area and we'll have the banquet hall. During the day, upstairs may be used for consultations, and once you have the event, people generally will be downstairs on the first floor, not the basement.
Okay, I'm trying to get the different floors sort of clear.
So second floor is like office showroom. First floor is kind of the hall, and then basement is storage.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. I'm sorry, Ms. Attorney Goldman, you were going to say something?
Yeah, Goldberg. I was going to say
Goldberg,
that that's okay. Typically, with a liquor application, in my experience, in something like this, it'll both the city will typically limit it to the actual space being used, as well as Ophelia is going to have to get a liquor license insurance policy, which typically also then limits it to the area that the event actually is. So I think there are those protections that will be in place as well.
That was one of my questions actually, and concerns is how sort of broad is the liquor usage going to be in the space, and especially.
I'm sorry, please.
So especially I was thinking, in the conference area, is that really considered an area that liquor would be served? Or is it just the banquet area that is going to be served? And so I'm trying to just familiarize myself with the space. I've seen the diagrams, but just from a usage standpoint, and because there's multiple uses of entertainment and banquets and conferences and that sort of thing, I'm trying to get an idea of how the liquor license is mainly going to be used and should really be limited to.
If I can interject for 1 second, what I want to say is that most hotels, if you visit a lot of hotels, so on the first floor they have conference rooms. And at some point in time, these conference rooms move their partitions out, and you can have a big party like a wedding you can rent, and then during the day, or you can have these conferences. So that space is going to work very similar to that, where you can use it for different types of events. So you can close them up and create like a smaller room atmosphere for conferences or meetings, and then you can expand it and open things up and create the bigger events, like weddings.
That was actually the premise of my recommendation of having the naming, which I understand that you've already branded a lot of information with banquet is associating a conference center more with a hotel per se, because conference centers are more flexible in capability, whereas usually banquet halls are less flexible, as conference is less flexible. So that was why we go back and forth between, should it be called a banquet hall or should it be called a conference center, which has more flexibility in usability. So
uses for banquets, it's for receptions and things like that. But with regard to the conference, it's all a matter of moving tables and chairs. I mean, it can be a huge conference for a huge corporation downtown Chicago needing a place to stay, or not a place to stay, but a place to have a big event. So that in that instance, and they won't be in the little conference room. So that's why I said it's schematics. It's a matter of moving tables and chairs. So in that instance, then, you know, the big boy tables will be in there, and they can do whatever they do on this side conference and come in here, and then they just have continue their conference. It depends on how big or how small it is, which room they will use. So,
and
tables and chairs.
Right. And Ms. Byrne, you raised a very good point, and I think something that Howard and I thought about as we were thinking about the definition. And to your point, when I saw the Ophelia's name, which is, you're correct, is Banquets, Entertainment, and Conference Center. And then I looked at the actual space and said, well, this isn't McCormick space. You know, the reality is that it's going to be primarily used for, again, using McCormick Center as the comparison, relatively small conferences and entertainment, such as things that you see at a wedding. And so that's why, and I think to the Plan Commission's comment and credit, is what got us to tweak the definition to not be, you know, the banquet hall of the 1950s that you see in so many cities, but to think about how modern banquet halls are being used. And that's what got us to the definitions. We saw what other cities were doing with business owners such as Ophelia thinking, well, wait, I don't want to use this just for banquets. I don't want this hall to stay empty when there's no wedding happening. And so I do think you will see throughout the country that what I thought of typically as a banquet hall is a definition that's been morphed.
Yeah, I mean, it can be for bingo. It can be for, you know, salsa night. It can be for, you know, those different types. So like I said, it's just schematics. It's a matter of moving tables and chairs around to make it happen for the event, to accommodate anything, anybody, any type of event. That's what that's for. Of course, it won't be.
Well, that's where I also want to be very careful is, you know, in Illinois, they allow a general business license that allows you to do kind of anything. But once it comes down to the municipal level, there's zoning requirements that we want to make sure that we're clear on definition so that we can ensure that how this is being zoned and defined accurately defines what is actually going to be happening in there, as opposed to sort of more broadly enablement. Hope that makes sense, but
yeah. And it may be when it comes to the point of getting, when this is finally approved by City Council, it often happens that, you know, while your corporation council said, yeah, my definition is fine, it's tweaked further to address some of your comments, Chairman. And, you know, totally fine with that. That's very, very common in approvals as it goes through these processes, just as the Planning Commission got us to rethink the definition, are moving the ball a little bit further to have, again, because it's the first ever in your city. I applaud you for your careful thought. And again, you know, I don't think the definition should, the overriding concept is approval with some flexibility, regardless of how you ultimately call it to reflect the use that will be ultimately. I'm sorry, I'm tired.
I understand.
The ultimate use. Thank you. Right.
I understand. Thank you for sharing that. It's just that's just been a little bit of my concern in, you know, reviewing. I know you want to do all kinds of cool and fun, you know, business ideas. I just want to make sure that, you know, again, from a municipal standpoint, we have to be a little bit more specific with understanding how zoning applies to, you know, some of the uses across.
We're not doing any drugs, that's for sure. Okay, so it's no drugs, none of that stuff. But it can be educational seminars. Just, you know, if you have another business outside of Blue Island, you may say, you know what, I I want to bring my group in for a seminar. Do you have space? You know, I've used Raven's space. I run a not-for-profit for women. And so because my space is not open, I've used the vault. They have a room back there. I've used that to bring my women in and have our, before the COVID-19, and we just come in and it's all about women. And so it's keeping it real. It's all about us, soul to soul. And so that's what it is. I've used that space for that. And so it's not, let me tell you, let me just kind of clear your mind. This place, this place will be a place of elegance. Without saying too much. I don't think you'll have to worry about drugs or young people coming and shooting or whatever else you guys may have a concern about. It's not, I know you've been to classy banquet facilities. I mean, if you've been to Donofrio's, if you've been to some of the really nice ones down, you know how they run it. And so mine would be no different from that.
That is of no concern of mine. I assume, all best intentions, and as a good business owner, you want to keep up your image and your branding, and so I had no assumptions otherwise. So, and I appreciate that though. Again, it's the different types of business: restaurant versus entertainment versus conference center versus, what is its ultimate purpose, and therefore what is its ultimate requirements, parking, otherwise, that would be required for definition. So we ensure that you say you're going to be, a certain type of business, and therefore evaluation, review by the city officials, can continue to validate that is what you are and that's what you're doing. So that you're not entering another type of business within the business that hadn't been previously approved.
I get it. I understand. I mean, it's just
So
like
it's just that kind of a clarification.
Yeah, I get it. But it's just like any other business. Everybody comes in with an intent. Any person who's a business acumen, we come in with an intention to run our business successfully. It depends on the crowds that you bring in and what type of person you allow to open these businesses. I mean, when you look at some of the backgrounds, you look at the integrity of a person, you can kind of tell what's coming in and out, even by appearance, if you just really examine the situation without discriminating. And so.
Right, exactly. Again, that's not something that I'm particularly paying attention to. It's more along the lines of what type of business is, being proposed, and how flexible is that definition, as a text definition, as a special use definition, so that we can ensure that, we are assessing it. We can say that we kind of rounded the corners and, made sure that we had this discussion, that this is really what its intention is.
Well, for the most part, it's banquet hall. The banquet halls, we run our systems the weekend, Fridays, usually Friday evenings, Saturday and Sunday. During the week, I love to fill the space up with doing other things. Movie theater night, dinner theater night, doing other things just to keep from having an empty building during the week. But it would be something always monitored appropriately. I'm not 25 anymore, so I'm not swinging off poles anymore.
Thank goodness. Well, okay. So does anybody else have any questions or comments?
This is Ron Bloom. Just a comment. I mean, I think really what we're all trying to do is our due diligence, in looking at this as the, first type of business within that area, and also look more broadly toward, the plan, the Blue Island plan, and, to the degree possible, determine, potential impacts. I think, as with any new business, as I've gone through the documentation, as I've listened to the conversations, both with respect to this specific application and other planning considerations, this could very well be a catalyst for other development in the area. We talked about hoteling, and we need to keep that in mind. But so we need to craft things that, that help support that are, respective of what we need to deal with today when it comes to things like parking and those kinds of things. But I think that from, again, what I've reviewed, from what I've had the opportunity to listen to, everyone has a common focus of doing the right thing and doing the due diligence as this moves forward.
And Ron, I appreciate you saying that. I just have to say, a lot of times what happens is it's our nature to kick against change, but change, if you just allow it to be change, it can be very good. So when you're closed to change, then that's when you get no growth or development. So I appreciate what you're saying, because a lot of times people come in and they're like, we've never done that before. Okay, well, let's try it. You know what I'm saying? And usually when people have the attitude about growing, you can never grow. I mean, to see something like this come into Blue Island, can change the whole perception of Blue Island. This is something new you don't see in a lot of the other suburbs. And then when you do see it in some of the municipalities and other suburbs, they're not run professionally. My husband and I are professionals. We've been in the business for a very long time. We've run banquet halls. Like I said, my husband run the most successful skating rink in America. It's noted. And so we pride ourselves on not just coming to the municipalities or the villages or the cities this is me, myself, and I. We're people of wherever we are. Wherever we are,
Yeah.
we have.
I see it as being a value. Again, it's a new idea for the city. I encourage business, encourage managed business, people, facility, ideas, capabilities. But I see that corner of our city is really expanding, and it can be exciting. It can be a little scary, because it's like, oh, we're growing, and we're kind of growing fast here. How can we ensure that we all can continue to be successful, both in planning, communication, and management? We have some business usage in our city that came in, and it's been rather exciting, but it's kind of caused some challenges as well. So these are things that are of mind as we look at your business, and we only hope the best for you. We've got these boxes we have to tick, and check marks that we have to ensure that it follows our zoning requirements. That's what this committee is for zoning review. Mm-hmm. So do we have any other questions or comments? We're running on time here. So are we ready to? Are everybody okay with voting for this now at this point? Agreeing that this is agreeable? Any questions? Do I hear a motion?
Actually, I was going to ask Howard if he could make a recommendation as to what the motion may sound like.
Well, the motion would be for approval of the special use for Ophelia's banquet.
Okay, well, in that case, I, Jeff Atwell, would like to make a motion that we accept the special use of banquet for Ophelia's banquets in the UTOD.
Yeah.
If we could correct that to banquet hall.
Banquet hall.
Okay.
Right.
I, Joseph Martin.
Do we have a second?
I, Joseph Martin, would like to second the motion for the banquet hall. I think it'd be great for our city.
Thank you.
Roll call, please.
Chairperson Byrne?
Aye.
Jeff Atwell? Aye. Joseph Martin?
Aye.
Ronald Bloom?
Aye.
Motion carries 4-0, Madam Chairwoman.
Okay, thank you very much. So now on to the fun one. Parking variance. So the parking variance, the reason we have a parking variance is because this facility does not come with parking, and it is requiring a a quite sizable amount of parking. If we also include, which we are, the retail space, we're trying to kind of review this all at the same time. Attorney Goldberg, did you have some comments on the review about that?
Yes, I guess most succinctly is that, and is reflected in both the application and the staff report, the applicant is cognizant of the fact that the city commissioned a parking study, and the application is consistent with the suggestions of the parking study, in that it will utilize the multiple lots, as well as having the potential for overflow parking in 2 private lots that are under consideration for being leased. But most specifically, that there will be a valet parking agreement, as well as clear communication with the conference users ahead of time in terms of the capacity for the space, as well as the users of that night, what type of parking is anticipated, so that Ophelia can determine if how the parking valet might have to be used. Now, having said that, there are, she will let people know about all the available parking spaces. Many people will want to park their own cars, as you know, and parking a block or 2 away is actually something they prefer, so they can get out of Dodge quickly after facility. So some of the comments about everybody parking right there, I think is, again, something you have to see on a night-by-night basis. If you've got an elderly party luncheon, yeah, people might want to be closer, or for that matter, in this day of Uber, you may find that there is no parking issue. So my understanding is that the parking study shows that there is adequate parking space for this use, as well as the other existing uses in the city, as well as uses yet to unfold. And so with that, as well as the availability of a parking valet if needed, I think that the parking requirements have been or will be met. And again, too, it's impossible to say now, right, what today on a night-by-night basis, what that situation would be. And again, I would remind you that not only as a zoning body, but as a police enforcement and a building code body, you have the right on a case-by-case basis to, pull Ophelia aside and say, this isn't going to work next time. So unlike a business that is meeting every night the same thing, there's going to be a lot of flexibility for adjustment on a as-need basis. Related to that, as I said before, I think I've been very impressed with Ophelia's interest in not only this banquet hall, but thinking broadly about its impact on the city. I suspect you will see in time, as there are other events at the bowling alley. It's typical for owners to talk among each other and to make no one wants to see their business not succeed, and vice versa. And again, I think there's a lot of synergies between the businesses that you've described in the area, where smart business people such as Ophelia will make it work. That's all I have. I'll let you, specifically in terms of the arrangements, I'll defer to the parking study, as well as any comments that you have for Ophelia.
I'd like to
Thank
say,
you. Any questions?
With regard to the parking, of course I'm going to be in compliance, because that's what we do. But I have to, I posed a theoretic to Howard, and I understand, and he was saying, well, they don't, the change, and they've been doing this for a long time and parking here for a long time. But let's give Eagles an example. They have 10 lanes. So let's say they have 100 and some odd people. They need 50, whatever it is, for 10 lanes per. I was looking at the parking requirements for that. They would actually need 50 spaces if they used up all their lanes were being used. They need 50 spaces. Now, not to mention when they have their fresh fish fries and other parties, sometimes they would probably take up the entire lot, almost the entire lot. So my thing is, I don't like the idea of the double standard thing. And the reason I don't like double standard is because the parking lot, for one, is a free lot. Now,
right,
typically, it's discriminating against me to do what you guys are doing. But I understand why you're doing what you're doing. But in essence, it's discrimination. Because if this guy, suppose I have a night and you say, okay, Ophelia, you can do 30 of these. You can have 30 of these spots. Well, I come, my patrons come. I don't have any more spots because the bowling alley has taken the spots. So guess what happens to Ophelia's Banquets? I have to valet, right? Or my people are going to have to drive around to the other lot. I feel the same thing should apply to the other lots, to the other businesses. I'm not concerned about the physical therapy. I've been there all day. They get maybe 10 people come in and out, 20 people. I'm not concerned about that. But to say, Ophelia, you're the only one using this lot that I'm going to put stipulations on. It's discrimination in a sense. But again, I will comply. I don't have a problem having valet parking. I just don't like the double standards. If you can understand what I'm saying. I don't like that.
I do.
Because now I have this little restaurant that comes across the street. I have a problem with that. It's beautiful. She's growing. Everybody is trying to grow their businesses and do certain things. I say, it seems as though it's so hard to be fair in this situation, because now this is a bigger building coming in, needing even more parking spaces. Now, in saying that, go ahead, please.
Well, to your point, though, I completely understand that, and that's, you may have heard me say at the beginning of our meeting that, not only are we sort of a response organization, but I also see where there's an opportunity where I think we need to think about some of the bigger challenges that our growing city is having, and parking is really, from my perspective, one of the number one challenges that our city is beginning to have. And so that's why I have already started conversations with the city, with the committees, with the aldermen about some of the challenges that we are seeing here before our zoning board of appeals board, where we are seeing a number of requirements for parking, not just in this particular parking lot, but elsewhere in the city. And these are things that we need to, bring to the table and start having more conversations about, because we want businesses to come in. We want businesses to be successful. We'd like all businesses to be successful. But parking is one of those challenges that, as an older city that has been designed one way and is sort of being restructured in maybe other ways, that we need to really start thinking about the impacts of the, how might it curtail business interests? How might it create issues where there are conflicts, where events are happening, and now people are kind of parking all over the place, and catch can. And how do we deal with that? Again, we want to bring in the business. We need to think about the impacts of that. So I completely agree with you, what you're saying, and I don't want to curtail what you're saying, because I understand what you're saying. With all due respect to your comments and thoughts and our time, I hear you. I hear you, what you're saying.
But let me even add to this, because I'm trying to bring the business in and I want it to work, because I've invested so much money at this point. I am willing to do the valet parking. I am willing. I look here as I'm reading, and even in your City of Blue Island's parking ordinance, as I'm reading here, it tells me also, these are the following designated parking areas. And the first one is the Metro parking lot. So we've got, and that wasn't even included in our study. So the study proves that there's ample parking on the streets around the building. They said, okay, so, we were discussing, I was asking, can I get at least 30 behind the building? And I'm saying that because of my senior citizens and because of other people with whatever. Can I get at least 30 behind the building? If that's not the case, I'm still saying, I've got the church saying yes to me. Yes, Ophelia. We've got 58 parking spaces between the church and the school. I'm still willing to spend the money to valet over into those areas. Here's the thing that I'm having a problem with that, because then Howard sends me something that says, and I'm not going to do this. He sends me something that says, if I have to do this and use the other lots, who is saying, Ophelia, yes, you could come and you could use my lots. Now he's making me say, well, I have to do a deed or a long-term lease with them. I'm refusing to trap these people into something like that. So, but again, these people were not even included in the parking study. I, on my own cognizance, says, you know what, let me reach out. And I had spoken with Howard long ago about the church, and they said yes. They said, yes, you can use our spot. Push come to shove, I can use the Volts parking in the daytime if I need it. I don't have a problem with it. Moving people, I have to pay for it. So I get it. But I'm not going to trap someone in to say, you know what, I need to show the city of Chicago, the city of Blue Island, that I've got a 10-year lease with you, or I got a 12-year lease with you. I think this is my personal agreement with these people to allow me to do this. And so if that's what I have to do, I won't use the church and I won't use the school. Although they've given me, they say, Ophelia, yes. The school, of course, because of the not-for-profit situation, I have to make some type of arrangement with them. Maybe when they have a function, they can use the facility. It's like a bartering situation. So they would definitely not have a monetary incentive because it's not-for-profit. But it could be a bartering situation with them. Also with the school, she has no problem. It's 58 spots over there that I can use. Then the Metro parking lot, I can go there. Then I got my 30 here if you give it to me. Or if not, there's plenty of street parking around me according to the survey. So parking with me is not an issue. I can make it work because in all of my brochures, I would be able to show maps. So these are areas that you cannot park in. These are areas that these are designated areas for Ophelia's banquets specifically. So with regard to that.
And that's good to know, because I think, you're helping to facilitate the success of, where your folks can park. I think, it benefits everybody because it's planned, it's thought out, it's coordinated, and it's defensible as far as I'm concerned. And I'm a little different perspective on the lease perspective of parking. It's my understanding that, and I feel, and I could be wrong, I feel that an agreement between you and the churches should be sufficient, for usage, from a perspective of, generally, these are the hours that they will allow you to. For example, the school has to be after 6 o'clock because there's school, going on. Church has certain hours that it uses the parking lot. So, within these hours or outside of these hours, you can use it. I'm a little more, I prefer a little more flexibility to say that there's an agreement. There are some stipulations between the two parties. As long as the stipulations are agreed to and followed, then that should be reasonable. As far as leases, I'm not quite clear on the value of that. A lease, you're not renting it, you're not leasing it per se. You have an agreement for using it. To me, lease or rent implies also compensation, which I don't believe that there's any understanding for that, or that's between you and the two parties. But as far as a lease is concerned, think that might be going a little too far. I think there needs to be an understanding, and it should be in writing with the stipulations of how the property can be used and when it can be used. I think that's good from a liability standpoint, from a risk management, as well as from a business understanding perspective. Just my opinion, but I think that would be the best thing. And it sounds like that's more along the lines of what you're thinking.
Absolutely.
Is
And
that
then the liability
reasonable?
insurance, absolutely, because I know as being the owner of the Valet, also there's certain insurances that I have to carry. And so I'm okay with that. Like I said, I'm never one trying to come in and kick against the prick. My thing is, let me work with you to make it happen. But I don't want, I'm not going to do a deed or a lease with these people that ties them into a certain, but
There needs to be a contract understanding. I would highly recommend that actually be in place.
yes.
I think between the two parties, as one party owns the property, one party wants to use the property. This is good business practice, good legal practice, good risk management
Yes.
type of practices. So that would be a requirement for me, is at least an agreement between the parties.
Yes.
With understanding and stipulation. So,
and I've understand talk with the pastor from the church, and she said she's had a conversation with you, and she understood.
Yes.
And she let you know that there will be.
So I've already talked to them. So I've heard what they have to say, and I've read what I've read from you all, and that's why I said I think that should be reasonable. At least an agreement between the two of you. It can be an open-ended agreement for, one thing that I will say, though, however, is part of a condition, as we've discussed here today, that the parking has its challenges, will need to kind of be worked on and kind of planned and adjusted, and I think it'll be a kind of a learning situation initially to kind of see how do we make this work, and so all parties are reasonably issues are addressed and things are accommodated from time perspective. But one thing that we are the zoning board is asking applicants under these kinds of circumstances where parking is a challenge or a variance is being asked, is we do require kind of a review after 6 months once the business opens, just to kind of see how things are going. How do we ensure that the shared parties are also working to make sure that this is a reasonable solution. And to be able to bring everybody back to the table and say, this is what we're hearing, can we make some adjustments? How might we make adjustments to ensure that, the going concern remains a going concern, a successful going concern in all aspects of the business. So just my thought on that.
If I can add a couple comments, I think the city did a lot of diligence as far as ordering the parking study. And I think the results of the parking study were that the parking was underutilized most of the time. And it's important to note that although these business owners have concerns, they are generally looking at a parking lot that's 50% occupied currently, based on today's needs, which are, most of the businesses are occupied. I think if you look at the trend as in the city, and I have done enough city development to know, you would notice that people are utilizing Uber, are utilizing Lyft. The parking situation is not getting worse. I think it's getting better overall. So, the trend is generally that buildings and facilities like this require less and less parking than most ordinances allowed for it in the past. Okay, and I think that's the general trend. I'm not saying that we're gonna utilize less parking than 80 spots, or if we're gonna utilize 30 spots and then have to valet outside, then that's what it is. We'll follow a certain guideline, and that's what we're hoping to get approved today, and understand how Ophelia will structure her business such a way to understand at which point in time can she do the planning properly and do off-site parking. That's all.
I completely agree, and thank you very much for your thoughts. I like that kind of thinking. I am all for the Uber and the Lyft. The challenge that we have with those ideas, unfortunately, is traffic. Many cities that have brought Uber and Lyft into the cities have jammed the traffic, which is another consideration. So hopefully it's a potentially consideration for a mixture of use and capability. So again, that would be something that would need to be reviewed and assessed after 6 months to see really what is the usage, how are things going, how much of it really is Uber, Lyft, how much of it is individual parking, where are there conflicts, et cetera. So again, this is a changing, malleable kind of idea since it is not a fixed agreement. So, but I believe according to something that we would agree with, or at least I propose, is because, so your business, Ms. Evans, as well as any retail business, I believe we determined that up to 30 parking places would be potentially accommodated in that parking lot, for your use. Again, if the retail begins and your business continues, there may be adjustments necessary as well. So, again, we know what we know today, but things will potentially need to be re-reviewed to ensure that it meets expectations of the city, of Mr. Leufman's retail customers, as well as Ms. Evans, your customers as well as the changing. There's a new coffee shop that's opening up next to Eagles. We have no impact analysis on that one either. So again, that's my point of parking is an issue that we really need to discuss in a bigger perspective. Not here today, but are there any other questions? Again, we're sort of running down on time here.
I have a question, Mr. Howard. Howard, could you make your recommendation and then also voice what a motion to said recommendation would sound like?
So, like I've mentioned in my staff report on page 9, the variance would be for 98 parking spaces, and this would be for the entire building, the 2-story building. So it incorporates worst case scenario, Ophelia's Banquet, the retail component, and the apartment. So that's conclusive, because like the parking study said, there are weekday peak and weekend peak, and they fluctuate. They could be very low or they could be very high. So 98 was the estimate that they used, worst case scenario for the variance. So in this situation, I'm fine with, noting it as, a variance for 98 parking spaces for Alex Leufman's building, the two stories for multiple users. I take it the question is parking, right? Lot A and the other lots that are being proposed. Maybe fine tune it a little bit in the parking variance. That parking will be accommodated on lot A up to 30, up to whatever number you guys decide. And then, valet parking will be used for the church property and for the school. So I kind of mentioned numbers in my staff report. I'm not going to go over it because, they're there. But there needs to be some, drilling down. Where is the cars going to go? Will it go on the street? Will it go in the parking lot? But it's tough because you don't know how the events will occur and how people will. Some people maybe want to park on the street. They don't want to deal with valet parking. Some people like valet. Some people will come with different types of transportation. So it's kind of hard to drill it down, but at least we should have an area or some numbers that we all agree. According to Ophelia, she's looking between 70 to 75 parking spaces as an average for her business, give or take. So if we're using that as a number, 70 to 75, she's using 30, then the other 45 parking spaces, which she said up to 58. could be accommodated for the church and for the school property, then it looks like it meets the numbers. So, you know, lot A plus Montessori school parking lot and the Lutheran church parking lot.
And even Metra.
Yeah, if I may, I understand and applaud your interest in trying to prospectively think about what Blue Island's going to look in 5 years from now. But I think to Ophelia's point, it's unfair for a specific zoning application to require a specific applicant to be limited to lots that are specific spaces and lots that are public lots. I strongly recommend that you consider requiring as a motion that it's approved subject to at all times the parking be in compliance with the recommendations of the parking study, with the interest of utilizing all 5 available parking lots as available, 4 or 5 or what they are, with the commitment, if those prove to not be available and accessible on a first come first use basis with others in the city, that she at all times have available a plan with valet parking and or letters of intent with the other 2 businesses. And I want to stress letters of intent.
Right.
I have worked with churches, I've worked with banks that have asked for parking lot church uses and vice versa. I'm very hesitant to commit to having a lease or long-term lease. I think having a letter of intent, understanding that this is a backup if needed, is all that should be required. I applaud the idea of Ms. Byrne's suggestion that and this is true with anybody, they have you have the right to have a business be approved conditionally. 6 months sounds a little bit too soon given the COVID environment, but perhaps in a year's time to reassess whether parking is adequate. But to sit tonight and say this spot or this spot, I think is premature and unfair.
This is Howard. Can I mention 2 comments on what was just discussed? The first one is, according to the parking study, lot A, B, and C are available for Ophelia. I've spoken to Ophelia and she wanted to go in the other route. She did not want to use lot B and C, hence the reason why we're always talking about lot A. Yes, she could also park on the street. The original parking study did give alternatives, A, B, and C. A is the one adjacent to the building. Lot B is the one next to Dunkin' Donuts and Harry Long Bar, and lot C is the one next to St. Benedict's Church, next to Double Play. The reason why, for Ophelia Evan Smith comments, was the logistics for valet. It's just easier to go to the church property and the Montessori school just down the block versus going to lot B and C. So I did bring that up when I was writing my staff report, and that's what I was basing it, but I changed my staff report per Ophelia's comments. So hence the reason why I brought that up, because she was the one that was requesting that. And the second part is this. It's not Howard, it's the ordinance. The ordinance says if it's shared parking, there needs to be some type of a lease agreement or something. The city of Blue Island has entered into a lease agreement with the Blue Island Health Center. So this isn't an anomaly. This is actually being done. Now, in this situation, I understand it's a little sensitive. Churches usually do a bartering system, a donation system. I get that. But I concur with the chairperson, there needs to be some type of an agreement. So at least we have it as document that, yes, Ophelia is going to be using lot A and the church and that, or the SEPA station, whatever, but this needs to be drilled down somehow in a recommendation. So it's not a free fall, well, we just granted a variance for 98 parking spaces, park wherever you want. This is what I think the chairperson is trying to narrow down or drill down.
Howard, just.
I agree, Howard. I agree with what you're saying, and I believe that Attorney Goldberg did cite, so a letter of intent would be an agreement,
Right.
between the two parties, and I believe that that's reasonable enough. It's not a lease, which has been mentioned. I don't think that that's really necessary, but a letter of intent, again, describes the relationship. It describes, the understandings and agreements between the two parties as a general understanding, and it is in legal contractual form to be litigated as necessary. Jeff, do you have a question?
I do. So it sounds like you and Howard are both like requesting that the applicant goes out and seeks more, documentation with the church and the school. So does that then mean that we should table
No.
the discussion?
I think there is a letter of intent that is a part of the, yes, it's part of the application. You have, Howard, right?
So what
You've
Howard
got
wants
a
to
letter
say,
from the,
what Howard wants to say is that the money that the city spent on the parking study identified 3 parking lots, lot A, B, and C.
Yeah.
There's not going to be a requirement that you make a lease with the city because that's already mentioned that the parking lot is open to the general public. It's
Right.
just recommending that, she could park her vehicles there and on the street. So in that situation, if she follows the staff report, there doesn't need to be some type of an agreement. However, now we're using private lots, there should be some intent or some letter.
So she could avoid this by agreeing to go with the lots that you recommended.
No, not me, the parking study recommended.
Right.
It's not Howard.
You can avoid like moving anything further out by utilizing the lots recommended in the study without leaving and seeking a letter of intent from the church or the school or whomever. She can merely accept to follow the guidelines there, and then if she has something beyond those guidelines that she's able to allow with the church or the school, then good for her. We don't need that in order to proceed if she agrees to what's in the parking study, correct?
Yes.
That is correct. And but the letter, go ahead, I'm so sorry.
I was just suggesting, ma'am, that if you'd like closure, that seems to be the path of least resistance so that you may proceed.
Well, it's 2 things, Jeff. One is we did get a letter of intent from the church. We did get a letter, and I think you guys may have copies.
and that's part of the application. That's correct.
But
And the chairperson has received it. She's aware of it. She's
Okay.
spoken with the pastor.
So here's the thing. I can use those lots. It's just my preference to find something closer. But those, and Howard, in my last, I think the last emails I have to you, I let you know in the correction, letting you know that no, I'm not foregoing using the other lots. I'm using, if I choose to use the church and the school, it would be as backup, pretty much basically as backup. But other than that, it's sufficient parking with according to the parking study that we have already. So I don't need to include that. If I use them, then I will include that. But for the most part, Jeff, like you're saying, yes, we can proceed with what was agreed to.
Right, and my goal is to move this forward for you and for Mr. Leifman so that we can actually get through it. So if it's a matter of like simply you accepting the findings of the study and then anything in addition to that you have an agreement with outside parties, doesn't necessarily even have to be brought into the discussion because you're agreeing to comply with the parking study.
Absolutely.
Correct, Howard?
So Howard would like to point for the record on page 10. Howard does speak about Ms. Connolly's recommendation about Lot A, Lot B, and C, and the additional on-street parking. On page 11, Howard goes on further to say Ms. Evans proposes 2 additional options to meet her demand between 70 to 75 parking spaces. So in my staff report, I clearly identified the first part and the second part. Now, it's up to I guess for record keeping, the 98 parking spaces will adhere to the recommendations of the parking study That's it.
I have a comment, please. I believe that the parking study is an option. However, and I think this is somewhat complementary to Ms. Evans' comments. Certainly, she would like to have her customers park as close to the facility as possible. I would encourage, instead of just the parking study, that there be agreements, which it sounds like that's reasonably amenable. And it doesn't necessarily need to be with the church. If you can, produce an agreement with the vault as well, there's other options. However, I think the bottom line of my kind of, I don't want to say it's a concern, but interest is the limited parking that we are suggesting in Lot A in front of the Eagles and the central city parking lot needs to be limited due to the other business requirements, so the abutting other business needs as well. So that to me is sort of a higher priority for this discussion right now. Is it sounds like the parking for the 98 spots overall is accommodating with a plan. And it sounds like, with the church, the school, elsewhere, there's opportunities. But from a limitation standpoint, I'd like to also make sure we're focusing on maybe a limited usage of our Lot A specifically to be limited to no more than 30 positions. And that would include the retail that has been included in this proposal. So that's kind of my comments on this.
Let me ask. Yes.
The retail also?
It includes retail also. So it's parking in Lot A up to 30, but not more than 30.
Howard?
Question?
Well, yeah, because I think Howard, help me because I know
This is the chairperson. This is her idea. This
Okay.
I didn't come up with it. What she's trying to say is, if we're going to approve the variance, 98 parking spaces for the entire building, then we should also take into account, is what she's saying, the retail. Now the retail is going to be different. The retail is going to probably be a daytime activity. So it's just going to be like the retail across the street, the dollar store. So I don't think it's really going to interfere with Ophelia in the evening with her parking, because the retail will be closed by then. So if Ophelia, if you're worried about, it's going to, you go from 30 to 24 because the other 6 parking spaces are reserved for the retail. I don't think that's what she's saying. She's just saying overcompensating. This is, if we're going to agree to it, it's for the building use.
Right. So having, these contingency parking opportunities, whether it be the vault, whether it be the church, the school, the other parking lots, I think that those should be understood that, that is kind of in general, that's your plan. If you use the school and the church, a valet opportunity would be a likely choice, as opposed to potentially or suggesting people park there. But that might be a little kludgy. But I will say, at some point in this process, this application process, I think we need to agree to something tonight. As generally, what is your plan? And what are the limitations within this plan? But also, using the church and the school, there's been the discussion of a valet service. At some point in this process, approval process, we would be seeing you again to review your valet plan to ensure that, again, we're trying to work out parking needs and we want to ensure that there's a reasonable solution to that. That likely, if you don't use all these other public parking lots, which is available, but part of it's up to you. We recommend you consider a valet parking solution for closer parking. That is a reasonable solution, but it's a highly likelihood that if you were to go a valet route, that we would also come back and meet with you to kind of just discuss that and make sure it follows the valet ordinance of the city, and that we just kind of tie up loose ends to ensure that that is a solution that would work for you successfully. Does that make sense?
Would it work for this evening? And I guess I say this both to the chairman and to Ophelia. If what you're saying, Chairman, is that you want to put some limitations on a particular lot, that you do that conditionally, subject to review by the board at the time you do the comprehensive review in a year from now. What I don't want is to say, she's locked in the 30 spaces and that's printed in the record without looking at the reality of what the needs are down the road. So I feel you can respond, but I think that if you're asking her to be flexible, that you also be flexible in terms of what you approve tonight, subject to reconsideration.
Generally, yes. But again, I think where I'm trying to kind of put some boxing around is how many spaces should she assume she may have access to in this lot A initially. All this is for the time being, because things are going to be changing as far as parking. But initially, we are assessing you for the 30 positions in the lot A, with the assumption that the overflow has got a plan. The plan has agreements, and it's a reasonable solution for where you're going to park anything beyond the 30 spots, or where the Alex Loisman is looking to utilize beyond the 30 spots, no matter what businesses within that parking, at least.
So
something like that.
30 spots is here for Ophelia's Banquets, but I think for what we're doing with the retail space on the corner, I think that should be excluded from the 30 spots, because that's just like any of the other businesses coming in and out with their, like, say, for instance, the restaurant, people eat and they leave, they come back. Same thing with the retail spot. People come in, they buy their artifacts, whatever they buy, and they come in and leave, and they leave. I think for specifically for the 30 spots should be specifically for Ophelia's Banquets, because, like I say, those are standard spot. I think it's fair.
I hear you, but I believe the application actually is for the building. And so that's what we're considering, is for the building, which includes retail. So the 30 spots is including, it would say 21 to 24 spots for Ophelia, and then the remainder for the retail. So part of that would have to be a coordination between you and Mr. Loisman for how are you planning to accommodate the building's use of that parking lot.
You know what? To just kind of, I honestly, I just don't think it's fair to do what you're doing with regard to, me 30. I will take the 30 for the banquet hall, but I just feel like for the retail spots, people are coming in and out just like any other store. It should be different. It shouldn't be any different than the post office. People come in, do whatever they have to do. I'm not going to argue the situation. If you say it has to be for that, I won't argue the situation at all. I'm trying to make this work for all. That's why I said I'll spend money to do a valet. I'll spend my money to do a valet. But I think it's unfair to say you can have these 30 spots, but you have to add these also. But I'm sorry, you can have these 30 spots, but it has to include the retail. I don't think that's quite fair. But like I said, I'll do whatever it needs to do to push this forward and to make everything work for everybody. I'll do it, and I'll just make sure. But I again, Madam Chairman, I have to tell you that I don't think it's fair.
This is Howard. Just to talk a little bit about the valet parking, I want Linda Goldberg, Ophelia Smith Evans, and Alex Leufman to be aware. This zoning board of appeals approved the parking variance for a restaurant, and they also asked for valet parking, and they also asked for a review of the parking and the valet scheme 6 months for that. So the valet ordinance is starting to be implemented in the sense that we as the city, we're requesting that valet is part of the conversation in any parking variance. So you're not the first one, you're now the second one with the valet parking with the 6 month review process. And this is a procedure, I guess, the chairperson wants to go through with any, like she mentioned before, any use that's applying for a parking variance.
I'm okay
Especially
with the
if
valet
it's shared parking. Right, but I just wanted to mention it to your attorney because I don't want you to think we're implementing the valet parking only for this. We are doing it with other businesses, so you're not the
Right.
only one.
And I think to her point, though, again, I'm not your lawyer, but I caution you to be careful if you are placing new restrictions on new businesses without also evaluating existing uses for lots that are supposed to be public and non-discriminatory. Just something to please consider it for this and going forward.
Right.
I appreciate that.
The key word is intensity. Well,
Mhm.
the part of zoning is looking at the intensity of the use.
I
A banquet
understand.
hall is going to bring more vehicles than a small coffee shop with 3 seats and a table. So the
Absolutely.
logistics is like Mami Chayo only has like 4 tables and maybe 8 seats. So Mami Chayo and the coffee shop, they're not going to bring the density that Ophelia is going to bring. The
No, I'm
retail
talking about
component.
in connection with existing businesses.
Well,
If
we're
you
moving
have-
forward. The city
Right,
is moving
yeah,
forward
right.
on that.
I'm just
Right.
saying,
And those businesses actually does involve, it's part of the conversation. So
Okay, good.
we have to take that into consideration. And I'm very much for the idea of the banquet hall proceeding, but again, we have to be respectful of the current businesses as well.
Right.
So what's the balance here to allow Ophelia to operate in that space and still like not cut off all of the rest of the businesses that are already in operation?
Right.
So is there a motion that we can?
A reverse discrimination type of thing.
Sure. So
That they came first. So
what's the motion that we could make right now, Howard, that would actually allow her to proceed and allow us to still act in a protective manner towards the existing businesses that are already there? So what is that motion that we can put forth so that there may be some closure to this?
So the motion would be for a variance for 98 parking spaces that will comply with the parking study recommendation. And if there are additional private lots, public-private lots, but mostly private lots, there should be some type of an agreement for the record for the city to have in case something happens. Risk management, something like that.
May I ask a follow-up question? That agreement that you're asking, in addition to following the parking studies recommendations, isn't that overkill if we're following the parking studies recommendation? The further burdening the applicant with written agreements with people who are above and beyond the study's recommendation?
This would be a question you would have to ask the chairperson. I'm fine with, complying with the parking study, but the chairperson has another way of looking at things, some type of an agreement.
I'm going to suggest, please, that you consider a letter of intent. A letter of intent will show that there's been a good faith effort on both Ophelia's part and a potential business owner to use a lot as needed. What I'm hearing, and it's just, if it's unfair, is that you have it broad, that she now has to go to 5 different businesses and give you, speculative leases. You already have one for the church. You have a letter of intent. You have it in your application. That provides ample space for excess parking if needed, and she's already agreed to use that if necessary for valet parking. I think that should be the limit of what you require tonight, and I please ask it that you consider that and approve that.
Madam Chair, I have a direct question with regards to that. She has one letter of intent that we already possess. That is in addition to actually agreeing to following the parking study outcome. So with one letter of intent, and I guess the option that we would have here is to, one, make a motion that you're making, or B, make a motion that Howard has said, leaving off all of that, and then just putting each motion to a vote. That, in my mind, if you have two different motions and everyone understands that, you know, motion one is to accept the parking study and move forward. Motion two would be yours with multiple letters of intent, where she only has one currently, which we possess. You know, if we want to bring any sort of closure to this person who's already now been here a third time that we're trying to help.
I understand. Yep. Did you, I thought that there was going to be a letter of intent with the school. Is that, what's the situation with that?
If it's going to be some, the letter for the school and the church are just backups. If I choose to use them, if I choose. So I'm agreeing with Jeff. Let's go ahead with what the parking study says. And then once the business, I can't determine much now because the business hasn't opened yet. Once the business is open, I determine how much parking I need, you know, how much volume is taking place. I'll be able to give you something certain. If it looks like it's going to go beyond what we're doing, then I need to come back to the board. Other than that, the parking study is quite sufficient to do whatever. Okay.
The motion could potentially also like list this as a probationary period of however long. Howard, would you suggest 6 months or 1 year, where we review like outcomes of the parking impact? Is that something that's possible?
So
yeah,
personally,
I think 6 months should be the right, you know, timeline.
When does a 6 month start? Does
6 months, we're going to have COVID still.
Let's just say 6 months from opening so that you have like a full 6 months, okay? So,
it's 6 months from when you open for business.
Okay.
That's good.
please understand that I think everybody on the board, including the chairman, is trying to like help you move forward. Everybody's just trying to take into consideration the concerns of the aldermen and the people in the ward and the existing businesses. We're just trying to make everyone happy. And as you well know, that's a very challenging task. Everyone has a different perception of how they are going to be impacted. So all we're trying to do is be respectful of them, but also to empower you to actually begin your new business and bring more opportunity to the town. So please bear with us as we kind of struggle through this. I apologize that it's taken as long as it has, and I believe that everyone here is hopeful that we can put it to bed and move forward.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Ron, you mentioned
just a couple of quick comments, if I may. I know we're running way long, but again, I want to thank everybody for hanging in there. Heard a lot of good things. I think, again, we're all trying to do due diligence. I used the term catalyst earlier, and I think very much this becomes a catalyst for the city to really grab a hold of the issue of parking and trying to grow businesses within the city and how we equitably do that. I think Attorney Goldberg had made some comments relative to a proposed motion that sounded very workable to me relative to recognizing the traffic study, recognizing the flexibility. And I think, we want to do the due diligence with the existing businesses, certainly. But it's really difficult when we've got a new business and we don't know what the demand is going to be at this point. And so I think it's reasonable to say at some point in time, I don't know that 6 months is too short or too long. But I think we want to be equitable. And I think that's the, the point that Ophelia was making as well. It's, on balance, we want to make sure that we're taking the same approach as we can, a balanced approach in recognizing the needs of the business and the needs of the community. And I think that's all we're trying to do. I think the challenge, candidly, and not to start a separate conversation, is we're not doing this in a vacuum. There are other businesses out there today that use parking spaces. We may find that for whatever reasons, there aren't 30 spaces even for Ophelia's to use on some nights. That's because we're an older community and we've got more people coming in, and we've got, parking conditions that we're trying to best manage. So that's a challenge. I mean, look at the success of the Vault. Even though they've got a big parking lot, there's a lot of overflow parking, and people will generally park where they find a spot. And I think, I noticed in reviewing some of the applications, we're not allowing any signage to reserve parking. So, I just want to compliment the work that's gone into this, the recognition of it, the additional things to look at valet parking, to look at additional spaces. I'm very much in favor of moving forward and then evaluating this as we go forward. There's no doubt in my mind, from everything that I've heard in the meetings that I've been in and all the documentation that I've seen, that Ophelia and Alex and Attorney Goldberg are looking at this very much as a community partnership perspective and want to make sure that it's successful for everybody. So however we put that in a motion, I'm ready to move forward.
Right. I would like to have something to say about this. The fact that Mr. Alex and the banquet hall is working together overall looks for the good of our city. I'm looking at being at Blue Island, being here, and this building has been sitting here for who knows how long, and that's not good for our city. But the other thing too, also being in business, to say review this in 6 months, to me, that's kind of putting it short, because when you're doing a business, to me, putting a year out to reevaluate what's happening, because in a year, you get a good feeling of what's going on. In 6 months, that's kind of, to my opinion, that's, in my personal business experience, 6 months is kind of putting it real short. I recommend going with this for the benefit of our city, but also a review in about a year. That's my recommendation.
One of the reasons why I recommended 6 months is 6 months from the opening date. So I'm going to take a wild guess, and I'm probably going to be way wrong, is, an opening date might be after spring. We're going to be going through COVID, and that's going to put us in shaky positions all the way around from a business perspective. I think at least into, could be April, could be May, could be June. Don't know.
Yeah.
Okay. I think
I want to make sure. I want to make sure I'm clear on what we're talking about opening date. I mean, are we talking about the first, not when she's advertising for business, but are we talking about 6 months from the actual first event?
That's how I would understand it.
Okay.
Well,
thank you for that clarification. That's a good estimate.
In building terminology parlance, it's final CO, final certificate of occupancy, is where the clock starts ticking. Once Ophelia receives that, once she receives that, she could start running her business immediately because I've met the building requirements. Final CO.
But I would not recommend that this board see her 6 months from when she has the occupancy certificate, because it may have booked an event 3 months from there. I would strongly recommend, if you're going to do 6 months, again, would recommend one year from the date that she has the first event. So you can look at the parking, you can see what's happening, but not from the day that it's open. So, please, if you're going to do, whether it's 6 months or a year, it's after the first actual event, so you can actually see in effect how parking is working.
And I would like to mention too, that Madam Chair just said just now, we are dealing with COVID right now. If you say 6 months from now, when are we going to come out of COVID? We may not be out there. So I'm still going back to a year from now for a review to give us some flexibility time.
I don't think you're going to. It's my understanding. Well, one, you've got to do construction, and it's my understanding it's not going to be anytime soon that you are planning to open for business, even if you were approved today. Is that reasonable expectation?
Still have months for construction.
I'm sorry.
As far as construction goes, I think, because we're going into winter now, I think you mentioned earlier, springtime would be the earliest, late springtime with that.
Right.
Plus with everything else that Ophelia needs to plan and everything, it's reasonable to say that we're going to be at the end of spring, early summer before a business would actually operate. Hopefully,
that was my kind of idea.
Hopefully COVID would subside to a fact that we can operate. The one thing that I think we're going to plan now is to have a COVID safer environment for the banquet hall. So in case we do need to operate in that environment, we would have the advantage over other banquet halls in developing a strategy as to how to deal with certain situations which other banquet halls never had to plan for. That's it.
That's a good point.
Okay, so are you still suggesting then, say, a May, June time frame for opening, even under COVID situations?
Correct.
Okay, because that's kind of what my thought was, based on the work that needs to be done, planning, all kinds of things. We're going into winter. It's going to take a little while. So it could be a year from when you open, and I don't disagree with that. Where I'm kind of going is not only assessing your business, Ms. Evans, but it's also assessing all of the other businesses at the same time and making recommendations on what the city needs to do more in general from a broader perspective. So there's how are you doing, but how is also the rest of the city doing as it relates to its city parking lots and this Lot A kind of area with the new businesses opening, et cetera. So it's not I look at it from two different perspectives. One, 6 months from when you open, to do an assessment on not only how you are doing, but how are the other businesses around you doing. If it's 6 months after you open, that's a year from now. It's December of next year. So it doesn't say you're going to stop doing what you're doing and now you're going to do something else. It's adjustments. So what I'm saying from a review standpoint, it's not a discontinuation. It's a review. So a review in 6 months allows us to not only assess where are you, where are other businesses, where's our planning, because that is a goal of mine, is to see, how do we take a look at the city's planning for parking, but how can we then make some adjustments? So it's an assessment. It's not a, I would say a review. It's an assessment. So if it is next December, that is quite a long time, and it is through the summer, which is really where a lot of business is really occurring. So there will be activity. I know you're going to bring in business. I know as soon as you open, that place is going to be rocking and rolling. I just know it, because you're just that kind of person. So, and in all due respect. So I think really 6 months, I would like to stay with 6 months for that purpose. I hope you understand what I'm trying to say.
At this point, okay. Let's just move forward. I mean, we're stretching this out.
Please stop. Okay. So do we need two motions? One, do we approve the, the parking variance understanding, but what are the, because there's conditions we haven't even gotten to. And then two, an assessment after 6 months. So the initial motion would be to accept the parking study. Let's start with that. And then maybe a second motion would be to have a review after 6 months. Is that reasonable?
If I can correct, I think it's accepting the parking application is your first motion.
Howard, do you want to maybe state that for the record?
So the idea should be, it should all be in one. It should be stating the fact, 98 parking spaces, complying with the recommendation of the parking study, right? With the condition that after a final CO, after 6 months, there will be a review or an analysis.
Yes.
So it should be the variance plus the condition. It shouldn't be separate, it should be together.
I agree.
Okay.
It's your call, but yes, that's what you would typically do.
Okay.
Great.
What he said.
So since Howard made the recommendation, I am moving that we move forward with the recommendation that Howard just stated to accept the parking study with the
Parking application.
in 6 months after opening.
After a final CEO, certificate of occupancy.
Correct.
That's a reasonable definition, attorney?
You're saying
Yeah.
after occupancy, does that mean when you start construction, or that mean when you're doing business?
No, it's when she goes to the building official, says, I have complied with everything building related. I like to get my final CO so I could open my business that same day or the next day. So it's the ending of the process, not the beginning.
Okay, and now from that date, 6 months from now, she's going to evaluate how her business is doing?
No,
Not
she's
6
going to
months.
apply for a building permit sometime, I don't know, maybe in January, February of next year.
Oh,
That
okay.
building permit could take 6 months or it could take a year. It depends on what they uncover when they're doing the building renovation. When they're close to finishing everything and the building official makes the final building review and issues a certificate of occupancy, then that's where the clock starts to tick. You could technically open because the building official is giving you that assurance that everything has met building, fire, zoning compliance, health also.
So we can't say 6 months from now.
No,
It's got to
Final
be,
CO.
whatever that moving date is
the
for
final
when they're
CO.
finished.
Because we
Right.
can't do it on the building permit because she could submit it in February, but it could take 6 months or it could take a year. It's when that permit closes, when the building official issues that CO, that's where the clock should start ticking because technically she could open.
It should be.
So the motion would be with that specific definition.
Right, the final CO. It's the same thing that we used with the restaurant. This is what most
Right.
businesses do. This is where I've worked in many places. The conditions are always final CO. For example, if someone has to do landscaping for a parking lot, until the landscaping is done, the final certificate of occupancy can't be issued. That's the way municipalities control the condition factor. In this one, there's no physical factor. It's just the moment she finishes all her construction work and it complies to all the codes, the CEO is offered, and then that's where the clock starts ticking 6 months into the future.
So in the event, if there's not an event, not that there won't be, but if there isn't, theoretically, and for 2 months after the occupancy, the numbers could be skewed in what we're trying to evaluate in terms of parking, right?
And this is why I was suggesting 6 months after the first event, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, I personally, I think that.
Well, that's why Joseph was saying a year, because
Right.
you can't really,
Right.
that's why he was saying a year.
Yes.
Right.
And that makes so much more sense as a business, from a business
Right.
standpoint. But that's why, he
Yes.
was, that makes a lot of sense from a business standpoint.
Because I think essentially we're trying to get a good picture of how are things going from a parking perspective. And if you have too short of amount of time and you have a couple of small events, that's one thing. If you have a couple of big events, that's something else. A year
Exactly.
gives you more time to evaluate that from my
Right.
perspective.
Right.
That's why I agree too, but I'm okay, but I agree with you.
If we said 45 days, I bet you'd go for that too.
No. That's too soon.
At this
No.
point, you're right.
No, Ron, probably not.
I mean, yeah. So again, I'm sort of back and forth between now 6 months and a year because I agree, that your first business opportunity really maybe starts the clock sooner. I think we're looking at all this in sort of a vacuum of what's happening with this specific business, as we should. But I'm also trying to consider all the other things that are kind of going on around it and what makes sense from an assessment standpoint. So I will go with the 6 months after the opening, after your first client. But I don't really want to go too much longer than that because I think there's going to be too many things happening, and I would prefer that we go sooner than later. But again, if it's not your certificate of occupancy, then your first event, I will go with that.
6 months after the first event is the condition, Howard, I think that you're saying, is the review. Okay.
So, what I'm going to say is this. So technically you get a CO starting today. Tomorrow you could open up your business, but you're saying to the board that I won't start the clock until maybe 3 months into the future, even though I open tomorrow until a first event starts, then we start the clock.
That's
Is
why.
that
You need
what
an
you're
event
saying?
for the people. You need an event for all the people. So I mean, and all the people are testing the parking, and
Right.
so that's my understanding is from a logic perspective of what we're really trying to evaluate is the parking needs, but the parking needs are really triggered by an event.
Exactly.
Madam Chairman,
So-
may I interject if I can?
Sure.
Just a suggestion. Why don't we, in 6 months, if you have complaints, reevaluate? If no complaints, take it to a year to give us time to really assess the parking, what the valet parking, to see how everything is rolling. I think that's fair. But in 6 months, if people are saying, well, I'm having problems with parking, then come back and review. Say, look, okay, Ophelia, people are saying thus and so. So give me a chance to rectify whatever is happening. And then within the year, come back and do an actual evaluation to see if things have changed. But in 6 months, I'm just saying, God forbid, suppose I don't have an event, a big event for 3 months after opening. It's not a fair assessment. It's not a fair assessment.
Well, that's why I was trying to realign it with your first event. So to your point, you open, you don't have an event for 3 months. Well, that doesn't start the clock. The clock starts after your first event.
Okay.
So it could be 9 months after you open.
Hey, how's this? Wait a minute.
It's 10 o'clock.
How about 6 months after the first event with X amount of people? So if she's gotten an
No.
event with
No.
2 people.
I don't want to do that.
Give me a
Because
number.
we're going to be
and let's-
sitting here with a
No?
slide rule going, okay, is it big enough? Is it long enough?
All
Is
right.
it,
Okay.
you know,
All right.
you know,
Okay.
that's,
All right.
uh,
Never mind. Withdrawn.
You're splitting hairs here. Please.
too many variables.
I'm going to throw something in
I
here.
got to narrow down the variables.
I want to throw something in here right now. We keep talking about 6 months or a year. How long have we been working on this right now?
3 years.
Thank you.
I gotcha. But we got to put a stake in the sand. I need a reasonable approach. I think I still believe 6 months is the right thing. There's going to be a lot of changes. I think, ladies and gentlemen, we do not know what's going to happen a year from now. There's a lot of changes happening all over the place. Our city is changing. Our elections are changing. Our federal elections are changing. Laws are changing. Too many things are changing. That's why I'm saying shorter is better from an assessment standpoint, really. But I believe that, 6 months after your first event. So I think that's just really the right thing to do, because it's going to be, in the fall or early next year.
Okay. All right.
One
so,
way or the other.
Whatever she says.
That's a long time from
Right.
now.
Okay, first event,
Let's go.
6 months
I
after
think
first event.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and the community development manager has to be notified when the first event occurs or will start. So he has
I got more work to do now.
Well,
so
and
it's not a
again,
moving target.
sure.
Okay.
Yes, yes, you can add that she has to give notification so that you all can plan for an event or plan for a meeting, knowing when that date is. That, Howard, that's completely fair. So yeah, Ophelia will give you notice of the first event. Makes sense.
I say it does. Let's move on.
Yes.
Howard, can you make the motion or actually state the motion, please?
Okay, I will. So the parking variance is for 98 parking spaces that will comply with the parking study recommendations for parking, and a condition to come back 6 months after the first event. And please notify the community development manager to record the time frame.
I,
The
Jeff,
first event.
would like to move.
Do we have a second?
I, Joseph,
Anybody?
Vernon, second.
Joseph second. Roll call, please.
Okay.
Madam Chairwoman,
Aye.
Jeff Atwell, aye. Joseph Martin,
Aye.
Ronald Bloom. Ron,
He's on mute.
you hear Ron?
Aye. Yes. Aye.
Madam Chairwoman, motion carries 4-0. Congratulations, Mrs. Evans Smith or Smith Evans.
Can you guys just do me a real big favor? Just call me Ophelia.
Ophelia.
We want to be respectful. We're
Please,
trying to be respectful.
Thank you so much. We
And
appreciate it.
if I could again, I want to say thank you for your perseverance.
Thank you.
You're really impressive with the partnership, Alex, Ophelia, Attorney Goldberg. I mean, really, I think very well done. Howard, I know it's been a lot of work on you to try to pull it all together and get it, all the information out and so forth. And, so I'm glad we're finally there. So
Okay.
Thank you guys.
Yeah.
I appreciate everything.
Thank you.
Not to hold up the continued conversation, but there are a few sort of less loose ends that we want to also make sure are addressed. During the application process, what we were reviewing here is a parking variance, text amendment, and a special use. And there are specific requirements for each of these. There are several that kind of cross all of them. But one of the issues that I think is still outstanding that I'd like to sort of quickly review, if we could please, is as of today, one of the requirements basically is where is it? Certification of taxes paid. Mr. Leifman, we checked the property and it looks like taxes, certification of taxes paid is still outstanding. Can you comment on that, please?
I will check. I'll get it paid off. I'm not sure what the situation is. It's, I'll get a certification for you.
Do you have an appeal process, Alex?
Well, we're appealing.
You've
We're
appealed the
appealing
taxes?
last year's taxes, so they're
Right,
not paid
so-
because we have to pay estimate.
Right. So you do not need to pay if it's under assessment, right?
Oh,
And
it's
then there'll be an
under assessment.
adjustment afterwards, yeah. So I think that's
Okay.
complied.
I just want to let you know, however, that the process can't continue until your taxes are paid. So even though it is under appeal, the taxes are still outstanding.
When you
So
say
I need to make you aware of that.
Are you meaning the building, the construction?
No, not construction.
The property taxes.
Oh, I see. I'm saying you said the process can't continue. So I'm just making sure that that's not including the construction of the building, is it?
Well, construction of the building hasn't started because it doesn't have permits yet, does it?
So
No.
under the appeal process, you can only appeal if you promise to comply with whatever the appeal process is. So if the appeal is denied, legally, you must immediately pay any taxes. So again, Chairman, I think that by virtue of the fact that they filed the appeal rather than just saying, I'm not paying these taxes, I think you have all that can be expected now, especially given the fact that the appeal process is taking a heck of a long time, I know, from other matters because of the COVID delay. If you want, as a part of this, a requirement to immediately pay taxes, adjusted by any appeal, I think that would be fine.
I can have my tax attorney, the taxes are being done by a reputable firm, worse I convenient. So I'll have my tax attorney draft up a letter because he basically, just so you know, I mean, the taxes, they've increased taxes tenfold.
Yeah,
and,
it's happening everywhere.
I mean,
yeah.
We're just not able to pay. I mean, the taxes, for some reason, there's an error, we think,
Right.
because the taxes went from $15,000 a year to $140,000.
Yeah.
What?
Right. Have you submitted your appeal documentation to
Yes.
Howard? Okay.
Well, I haven't submitted to Howard, but I can. I was never asked for it, so.
I think that would be something that we'd like to see,
Okay, sure.
so that
So
we at least have a record of the appeal.
Yeah, no problem.
I want to jump in for just a second here. My battery is about to cut off, so if I'm out, I apologize. But we haven't mentioned anything to the applicant that this is a recommendation that we're making to City Hall. So there is another step after this where you would go present your case to City Hall before it's finalized and accepted by them. So we're merely making a recommendation, and we have recommended to allow you to proceed with the stipulations and in accordance with the traffic study. But that's their ultimate final call to accept our recommendation or not to accept our recommendation. At the time of presenting your case to them, you may also request that they do not accept the 6 month, and you can also ask that they change it to whatever you feel appropriate, which they may or may not accept that recommendation or request. So
may I ask a point of clarification? Again, forgive me because my zoning experience is primarily in the city of Chicago, but in that case, after the zoning approval, City Council will often accept the recommendation of zoning and not require further approval or attendance by the applicants. I mean, Howard, you can speak to whether or not that is the case in Blue Island.
So the situation here, we have another committee that has to review it. This came about with the new aldermen that were voted into office. It has to go through a committee first before it goes to City Council. Okay. So the next entity would be the Community Development Committee. That would be Chairman Fred Bellato, whose group will review it. Okay. Technically, you don't have to be there. I'll present on your behalf.
Okay.
That group can add additional conditions. He has done it with other applicants.
Okay.
And then it goes to the City Council, and then Mr. Bellato will present it under an ordinance under Community Development for review and approval. Most times the City Council will not recommend any changes or recommendations of conditions. They usually comply. There might be a chance that something could be denied. I've seen an application get denied at the community development, at the City Council.
Okay.
In reality, everything should be approved. There shouldn't be any hiccups.
And so we can speak afterwards. I guess my question was whether it is necessarily or definitive that the applicant needs to be there. You answered one question, usually not for development, and we can talk later whether at the appropriate point of whether she needs to be there for the council meeting.
I could answer it right here for the record.
Okay.
I do the presentation as the liaison on behalf of planning and zoning to community development. If you want to be present, you could be present. There's, you'll zoom in and you'll be there. If Mr. Bellato has questions, he could ask you or the attorney or the business owner or the property owner. And at City Council, if you want to participate in the Zoom just to hear, and you hear that, this is not going well, you could say, hey, I'm here.
Okay,
So
great, thank you.
You're always, there is always that availability that you can participate.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
So I have one last question though. So from here, do we have to wait before we go to the building department to get our
Yes.
permits?
Yes.
Okay.
So the next step
I
is
think
community
Howard,
development.
one of the next steps is also the business application review.
Well, the business license application cannot be reviewed until City Council approves these three ordinances: text amendment, special use, parking.
Okay. Yeah, so this is a continuing process.
Right, it's continuing. Step 2 out of step 4.
When is the next council committee meeting?
Community development will meet on December 9th.
Day before my birthday.
Oh,
December 9th.
Well, hopefully you'll have a nice happy birthday.
And this time period will give us time. The minutes have been created for the planning commission. Now we have to create the minutes for the zoning, which usually accompanies the application to community development. So then from community development to city council, that's where our attorney will review it for compliance, and they might add things to it or subtract things to it. But in this process, I'm going to reach out to the attorney after tonight to start that process early. So even during community development, if there's something that comes up, we should discuss it sooner than later.
great, thank you.
Thank you, Howard.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Howard, for everything.
You're welcome.
All that you've done. Thank you, all of you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so
You
much.
know, if I may, as Commissioner Martin referenced, this has been over a 3-year process. And
Right.
we made some important progress tonight. I think anything, and I'm going to just kind of speak as a citizen in Blue Island as well, anything we can do to help ensure that this doesn't go on for another 3 years, I think would be in the best interest of the city. If we can talk to the committees ahead of time, make sure that they've got what they need. Because again, I know that you have been put through various challenges from committees to committees and so forth. And again, I think again, it's a good catalyst for us as an advocate for bringing business to the city, that we do everything we can to move this forward.
Thank you. I appreciate it so much, Mr. Bo.
Thank you.
Okay, are there any other board member concerns? Sounds like we heard some good comments and such. Okay, do I have a motion to adjourn?
I so move, Madam Chairwoman.
Yeah.
Do
So it was
I
your
get a
son, I
second?
think. Right?
Second move.
Joseph.
Right.
Okay,
Roll call.
meeting adjourned.
Roll call.
Thank you very much, everybody, for your patience, and
We need to do a
Muzzle
roll
toss.
call. We have to do a roll call
All in
because
favor.
in participating in Zoom, we have to do a roll call. This is a state requirement. Each person has to say who they are because this is a state requirement, especially if we're using Zoom.
Kimberly Byrne,
aye.
Jeff Atwell, aye. Joseph Martin,
Aye.
Ronald Boone.
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned, Madam Chairwoman.
Thank you all very much.
10:46.
At 10:46. Thank you very much.
Wow.
Okay.